bees, they pollinate 75% of all of the crops that we eat. They give us 2.2 billion pounds of honey. They give us 29 million tons of cotton every year. They give us 49 million pounds of beeswax every year. And they give us some of the strongest pain medicines, as well as herpes and prostate cancer medicine. Collectively, the value is a hair under $600 billion a year globally. The humble bees give us.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 81. Dr. Reese Halter, The Power of Honey and Bee Medicines, and Why Bees Are Important to Our Planet. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Welcome back, everyone. How are you today? I hope you're doing well and you're surviving this weather. It's extreme these days. Every year we just keep reaching the record for the hottest year on Earth, which only beats the record of the previous year. Climate change sure is showing. Huge heat waves all over the world. Rains, floods, fires, sinking cities from all these rains that are ruining lives in so many people's houses. It's really devastating to watch, and it's sad and scary. But remember, there's something we can do about that, and that is to eat a plant-based diet, because remember, eating a vegan diet means you're not contributing to greenhouse gases. And it is said that animal agriculture contributes anywhere from 18 all the way up to 50% of greenhouse gases. So eating a vegan diet takes you out of this stat and helps the environment begin to heal. We have a lot of work to do, that's for sure. Now just remember how powerful it is to make a statement with your dollar. If you don't buy a product that has a negative environmental implication, and instead you spend your money on what you believe in, and with companies that are ecologically and sustainably producing products, then you're voting with your dollar. In that regard, we do hold a lot of power, you guys. The way they are winning the war right now is because they're subsidizing these farmers who raise all these poor animals for food. These animals are tortured, they're fed horrible GMO grains, they live horrible lives, and it's only because of the subsidized dollar that they can make a burger or a steak cost 99 cents, when actually it probably should cost $100 for all the commodities that were used to create this one burger. It's true. Someone did some research on that. I think it was in Cowspiracy, and it was something like $60 or $70. But anyway, this business is not only killing our planet due to the unsustainable nature of truly feeding the world like this, and not only because of the greenhouse gases caused by this inefficient food source, but it's killing us too. They win the war when they make a burger cost 99 cents, and then you go buy that over buying some whole healthy plant foods. And don't listen to the argument about the poor farmers who are going to lose all their jobs. That's a lie. We can retrain all of these farmers to grow organic crops that we would need for the world to eat. I guess it's a repeal and replace, right? Oh, geez. I better not say those words right now. Let's just call it a retrain and replace the animal business with a veggie business. Okay, that being said, I want to tell you, I'm super excited about today's show because Dr. Reese Halter is going to give us a live science class. I wanted for a long time to do a show with you guys on bees because the bees are so fascinating. Really, they're amazing little creatures on our earth, and they have such a huge impact on us. Our lives literally depend on them. And the life of a bee is so fascinating that I wanted you to learn all about this species and how they live, communicate, and work in our world, and how much they give us. Because once we truly understand an animal and how they exist, then it's much easier to have respect for them and to live more consciously with gratitude for all they give us. And bees certainly deserve our respect once you learn today how they exist and work so hard for us, all of us. And once we respect, then we start to see the interconnection of all of us. And we're one with the bees, and then we'll care more that they're in huge jeopardy as they are right now because of all the toxins in our water and foods. And a really big cause of their jeopardy right now is that there's this massive die-off of the bees due to all the neonicotinoids being allowed in our building materials, which they get on their little feet, and then they take it back to their hives. Therefore, they're dying in huge numbers. It's really a crisis, and it's one that is going to teach us a hard lesson. The lesson is going to be we're going to realize how much we need the animals for our own survival, because after today's show, you are not only going to learn how fascinating the life of a bee is, but how much we depend on them for our own life. And Dr. Reese is an amazing teacher. I asked him to do this show as if he were our science teacher and we were his students. So today he's going to teach us about the birds and the bees. Yeah, right, Deb. I mean, the bees. And like Jane Velez Mitchell, Dr. Reese is a passionate person that lives his life by walking the walk and by being a voice for the voiceless, which in his case is the bees, the seas, and the trees, and all the other animals that live on this planet. He cares so deeply that you can feel the pain he feels when he has to report one more sad story of how the environment is being killed by the humans. Geez, what a work. But I thank God every day we have people like Dr. Reese that can tell us the truth about science. Come on, you guys, who do you want to believe? Do you want to believe the industry that's profiting from all the mercury, fracking, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals? Or do you want to believe the scientist that has made it his life work because he wants to preserve the beautiful planet that's filled with animal life that's so astounding? I choose to believe the scientist who is walking the walk and not profiting from the lies about how these chemicals won't hurt us or how there's no climate change. Sorry, that story's just a bit too fishy for me. Many of you already know Dr. Reese Halter because he's a repeat guest on this show, but he's also the resident scientist of Los Angeles and of the Vidal Speaks podcast because I love his work. He's full of passion, his work has so much integrity, and he has a huge heart and huge shoulders that carry the burden of the situation on his shoulders so he can try to get the truth out and save the planet and animals before it's too late. And I love his work for that reason. But since the show has grown so much, many of you might not know who he is. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to get on talking about the birds and the bees. I mean the bees. Stop it, Deb. Okay, here's a little bio on Dr. Reese. Dr. Reese Halter is an eco-stress physiologist specializing in Earth's life support systems. Dr. Reese Halter's passion for the environment is lifelong. He is a powerful voice for the bees, trees, and seas, wellness science, and saving nature now. Dr. Halter is a distinguished conservation biologist, an award-winning broadcaster, and prolific writer. He has the unique talent of making current complex environmental issues accessible and compelling to any audience. He believes that human beings are terrific problem solvers, and for every issue, there are at least 3 solutions. His passion to protect our planet is contagious, and you're going to feel that today when he teaches us about the bees, you guys. Okay, everybody ready? Don't be buzzing around too much today. Just sit back, relax, and listen, okay? Here we go. Hi, Dr. Reese. Welcome back today to the Vidal Speaks podcast. You're our resident scientist, so thanks for joining me today to teach us about, I would say the birds and the bees, but not really, just the bees.
Just the bees today. Yeah, nice. Thank you.
So, bees, one of my favorite subjects. I think I told you before, the name Deborah in the Bible means bee. So I love bees, and I want you to teach us all about bees today. I want to learn about their community, how they work, how they live, and how they help us.
Yeah, well, basically there are social bees and there are solitary bees. There's at least 20,000 known kinds of bees on planet Earth, and my colleagues believe that there may be another 20,000 to find. So in the game board of nature, we believe that the bees were selected as nature's golden emissary to be a pollinator. And approximately 110, 115 million years ago, in amber, fossilized tree resin, we see the bees. We see the first bees. They haven't actually changed a lot in their shape. And the tree world, the plant world, approximately 120 million years ago, shifted from depending on the wind to move the male pollen to the female flower to fertilize and to make seed. So from the wind, nature believed that insects, particularly bees, would be her main emissary. And so the way to lure, as it were, the bee to the flower is, first of all, the big, showy, colorful, pungent smell of the flower. And also inside the flower, there's a liquid that is a nectar. And the nectar, it turns out, is very rich in sugar, carbohydrates, stuff that we all like. So to get the bee to go there, the flowers have this nectar, which the bee collects in a special crop called the honey crop and takes back to the hive, and they dehydrate it. So they take the water out of the nectar and they put a couple bee enzymes into the dehydrated nectar. And when they take approximately 20% of the water from the nectar, mixing it with the bee enzymes, turns into honey. And honey is the predominant, it is their only food. Calorically, honey is the equivalent of rocket fuel in its energy punch. So that's what the flower gives the bee. It also gives the bee, and the bees deliberately, both the social and the solitary, which I'll come back to in a moment, they both collect the plant pollen, the male pollen. And they take that pollen, which is very rich in protein, back to their respective hives or chambers, and they feed that protein, the pollen, to the young bees because it builds big brains, and I'll come to it in a moment. But bees have extraordinary brains, very big brains.
Wow.
And they need to have strong autoimmune systems, just like people. That's what the protein offers them. Bees, all bees, are electrostatically charged. Remember when you take your jumper off or your hoodie off, at the end of the day, sometimes your hair stands up, the electrostatic charge. Well, bees are very hairy and they're charged electrostatically. When they pull into the flower, they're moving around and trying to find the right position to either lap and draw the nectar in, or deliberately collecting the pollen and putting it in their on their hind legs. They have pollen baskets, these beautiful baskets, which they put the pollen in. But in the meantime, they're brushing up and down against the flower, and their bodies are collecting the pollen grains. So when
Wow,
they're working
that's
around,
beautiful.
sometimes they'll inadvertently brush or bump onto the female anther and pass the pollen to the female receptor. And the only difference between a plant and an animal in that respect is that for animals, in most cases, the male will ejaculate the sperm and shoot it into the female. Well, in a plant, the plant actually physically has to take the pollen grain and move it down toward the ovule for fertilization. So the plant does it a lot slower, is what I'm saying. So that's what the bees do. And we're constantly, Earth is such an exquisite planet.
It
and we
is.
really are just beginning, my geeky colleagues, because I'm a geek, to understand the complexity. We know there's approximately 1.9 million different forms of life on our planet, and it's cataloged at the Smithsonian in DC. There is believed to be another 13 million forms of life to discover. So the diversity on our planet is absolutely stunning. And having said that, the number of plant species continues to be adjusted upward. Now we think there's almost 400,000 different kinds of plants. 95+% of them are flowering plants. And that means that the bees, predominantly the bees, but butterflies also are pollinators, and bats are also pollinators.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not all bats, but most. Predominantly, the bees are responsible for pollinating at least 336,000 different kinds of plants, including almost 78,000 kinds of trees. There's 80,000 kinds of trees, and at least 78,000 of them require pollinators.
Well, I think that shows us so much about that sentence we always say, that people just, I don't know why they don't realize that we can't live without the animals. Because look at the bees. I mean, we know how necessary this is to have the bees in our world.
We geeks are always faced with this. Really, they're that important. So tell us why they're important. Well, for instance, for the bees, they pollinate 75% of all of the crops that we eat. They give us 2.2 billion pounds of honey. They give us 29 million tons of cotton every year. They give us 49 million pounds of beeswax every year. And they give us some of the strongest pain medicines, as well as herpes and prostate cancer.
Yeah, well, I want to get into
So we can come back to that.
Yeah, let's do that.
But collectively, where I was going with that is the value is a hair under $600 billion a year globally. The humble bees give us. Now, predominantly, it's the honeybee. So let's go back to the big differences. We have the social bees and we have the solitary bees. Most bees on planet Earth fall into the solitary category, where a female is inseminated by a male, and she is able, in any of the bees, social or solitary, she's able to hold on to a number of sperm, certainly enough for a solitary bee, which lives just a season, a female, to lay several dozen, maybe a few more than several dozen eggs. And what she does individually after she's inseminated, she will find a little perfect chamber, whether it's in the crevice of a bark, whether it's in a little what looks like a burrow in the soil, That's why, of course, we don't till, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't ever, under any circumstances, use these wretched leaf blowers that destroy everything. Aww. So she puts her little egg into the little chamber, wherever she finds that chamber. And then she packs into the chamber a dollop of honey that individually she has created, and a little dollop of plant pollen, the protein, and then seals it with a wax. The bees make, as people know the term beeswax, they make that wax from their abdomen. So beeswax is actually made by a bee.
I never knew that.
Right.
How does it come out? Do they regurgitate it out?
No, it comes out from a gland.
Uh-huh.
And that's interesting. It isn't like my mustard bottle where you grab a hold of it and go. She creates it more as a flake. And then she has to chew it. Bees have wonderful mandibles, jaws, and she chews it to soften it, and then lays it in as a sealer into a chamber. By the way, the honey, which we will dwell on in a moment, which is really it's such a powerful medicine, but it also, when it is sealed with the beeswax, it can keep, Deborah, for thousands and thousands of years. We have honey samples from the ancient Egyptians. We also have honey samples from part of Turkey and part of modern-day Israel, where we believe that the first cities kept hives over 3,500 years ago. So we have these samples because the wax, it seals the honey, but it also allows it to breathe, right? It doesn't cut the chamber off of any oxygen, right? Mm-hmm. So we have that, and we have these wonderful solitary bees. The solitary bees, the diversity is breathtaking. In North America alone, there are somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 solitary bees. There's so many bees and so many kinds of bees. And by the way, they're so small. They almost look like a fly in that they hover, but they're not. These are very small little creatures.
They're totally different than a honeybee.
Oh, yeah.
They're
tiny.
And are all the solitary bees really tiny?
Many of them are. Some people will have heard of the carpenter bees.
Right.
They're not that tiny.
So, and is a solitary bee called solitary because it lives all by itself?
Yeah,
always?
Always. And they're the unsung heroes because very quietly and really before our very eyes, but we aren't paying that much attention, they're pollinating. And it's not just that they're pollinating perhaps 336,000 different kinds of plants. Ladies and gentlemen, the solitary bees are pollinating our food, even to the extent where my colleagues recently said that, and we're going to talk of the social bees, the honeybees in a moment, because they're the Clydesdale of the human world for pollinating. My colleagues believe that the solitary bees pollinate more on our crop fields than our honeybees, which is really staggering, actually.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them we don't even know. So we'll come back at the end because they're a very important player on our planet.
And then the solitary bees are, you always say she. Does the male bee die earlier than the female?
No offense meant, listeners, but it does turn out that males in the bee world and in many other creatures in nature are not much value other than they have sperm. They don't rear the creatures. Although some do. The most remarkable, of course, a slight digression, are the male seahorses.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And the emperor penguins in the Antarctic,
That's
where
interesting.
they have the heavy lifting to gestate the eggs of the young, and then they are relieved. Oh, well, the emperor penguin is slightly relieved after 8 or 9 weeks of shuffling in the dark in very cold temperatures. But in the bee world, the term, when we talk of males, which are referred to as drones, they do epitomize the word deadbeat. In the solitary world, they really only last for a very, very short while, and they inseminate the female, and then they croak. In the social world, in the honeybees, so honeybees, there's two interesting delineations in the social bees. One, the three gradations are, we have the honeybees, and there are, there's under a dozen. I can't remember the exact number. People in the bee world will come at me. There's somewhere between 7 and 9 in a family that came from Africa that the honeybee that we know came from, which is actually an Italian bee. It's a North African that roved up to Italy. There's also a black Russian honeybee, rather irascible but very hardy, as well as others. Then there are the stingless bees. Right? These are bees that are almost the same size. In fact, they may just be the same size as a honeybee, but they don't possess a stinger. If you bug them, if you get in their face, they attack your eyes, your nose, and your ears en masse. So they operate subtropically and in the tropics mostly. Australia's quite famous, Latin America and South America. And then we have bumblebees. Bumblebees are definitely the Clydesdale in terms of the size. They're 4 or 5 times plus bigger than a honeybee, a worker. So all, as I said, in the social world, in the honey, stingless, and bumble, it's female. It's an entirely female-driven society.
Which many of the animals function like that.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the elephants a lot. They're so much...
Beavers.
Yeah.
And others.
Yeah.
And so the only way that society can run, and ants are the same, they have a queen. And the queen indeed rules. She rules because she is able to emit chemicals all day and all night long. And the chemicals, we call them pheromones, indicate how the hive is thrumming. And from her chemicals, which in the most case are a very soothing, calming chemical for the bees, they go of their tasks. Honeybees are really, truly remarkable. The lifespan of most of the girls is but 6 weeks. In a 6-week period, these little creatures can perform up to 20 different tasks. If you graduate in the bee world, and one of the tasks, before I go there, one of the tasks is they are fastidious. A beehive is a very, very hygienic city. Think of it as a city because it's really almost 100,000 individuals. But what they can do for a city is they do a lot of things that human beings could only ever dream to do. If you had the city, if you had a factory with 100,000 workers, would you believe that in a matter of 5, possibly 10 minutes, your entire factory, the hive, can change its operations on a dime? In other words, if most of the hive is concentrating on filling up the chambers, 77,000 waxen beeswax chambers that the bees make. Take 66,000 bee hours, and it takes 2 pounds of honey, roughly, to create those chambers. And those chambers, which are the most perfect hexagons,
they're beautiful.
at back-to-back hexagons, and they're angled, so when they put either the honey in, or that's where the little larvae are born, but for the honey, they're angled so the honey does not drip forth, and that chamber can hold 48 pounds of honey.
Whoa.
2 pounds, and it's 2 pounds of wax. I think I mixed one thing up. I believe it takes 20 pounds of honey to make the 2 pounds of wax, which holds 48 pounds of honey. And the physics in those honeycombs is used in every aircraft's fuselage in the world. That's where the wings on all aircrafts, that's where the fuel is. And inside the aircraft wings, they use the honeycomb formation to hold that weight. How good is that?
Wow, we finally learned something from nature.
Yeah.
And used it in the right way, right?
Yeah, and for a long time.
Oh boy, we need to keep going on that train.
So the bees, they have up to 20 different tasks. Around the queen, she'll have a dozen newborn workers. They call it her retinue, and their role, the queen has one role and one role only. She lays approximately 1,500 eggs a day. She can't feed herself. She can't water herself, nor can she remove her defecant. So all around her, these dozen or so new bees are taking the eggs, they're feeding her, they're keeping the area very, very clean, and then they pass the new eggs very gently up into the nursery, and that's where all the females are grown, and the chambers are all the same. Along the edge of the nursery, there'll be slightly larger chambers, and in those slightly larger chambers, that's where the males are grown. Usually the males, there's very few males being created because the males have one role. The male, if they're lucky in the bee world, after they're born, they're fed, then they're turfed out of the nest, out of the hive, and they wait for a nuptial queen to emerge, a new queen. And when she emerges, that's when maybe a dozen or so male bees in the bee lottery win. They will smell her. The male bees have eyes much larger than the females. And on their antennae, the antennae of the female can spot maybe 3,000 different chemicals. And on the male antennae, much larger, they have many more pores to sniff for the queen, because that's what happens. They sniff her scent, and a dozen or so, one at a time, of course, will land. They ejaculate in her it takes maybe 3 seconds. The queen pulls away, rips off the male's penis, and falls to the ground and writhes in pain. And he's won the bee lottery. That's a male
Winning
bee.
a lottery, that's kind of not a lottery you
Well,
really want to win.
in the bee world, otherwise the male bees spend about a week outside of the hive. They beg. They're incapable of going to a flower to extract any of the nectar, to dehydrate it, to turn it into honey. So they have to beg to be fed, and after a week or so they die.
Wow.
So that's the role. And then
So interesting and fascinating.
of the
nature-
20 different tasks, including cleaning the hive and tending the nursery, and of course, after the 3-week plus metamorphosis from an egg to the full bee, they have to clean fastidiously the chamber, right? And then they have to, when the honey comes in, when the worker bees arrive back to the hive, they pass the nectar in the honey crop to 2 or 3 receiving bees, who then dehydrate it. And they dehydrate the nectar by expanding their jaws maybe 3-5 times. So they open their jaw. It's almost like they dislocate it. And they do that to let air on it and dehydrate it. And then they put it in the chamber, and then another bee has to actually seal it. Several bees are sealing the chamber because the honey is predominantly for the bees to overwinter. It's their food, right? It's their food during the working season, but it's what sustains them during the winter.
Yeah.
So a hive of, I'm going to use a big number, but a hive of 100,000, say, will shrink maybe down to, 12,500 for the winter. And much like the emperor penguin I spoke of a moment ago, up north, they have to concentrically shuffle around the queen to keep her warm all winter long. The queen obviously is not laying eggs. She's just trying to survive. She can live for maybe 4 years. And the only way that the bees can concentrically move, and remember that the way the emperor penguins do it, is they're constantly shuffling so that from the inside, eventually you go to the outside because the inside's warmer. So everybody cops the cold and then comes back in for warm. The bees do the exact same formation, and they have to eat honey. Honey keeps them alive and their bodies functioning all winter long. Can be like 3-4 months.
It's amazing how they use honey for, like you said, bearing in the ground for those little bees.
Yep.
And then they use it for their food, and then they
Yep.
feed it to the queen, and then they use it to seal things. They really rely solely on their honey.
Yeah, they do. And the queen is interesting. She doesn't actually get honey. She gets
Royal?
pure protein. It's a vitellogen. Some people will call it royal jelly.
Yeah, that's how I know it.
It's actually the protein vitellogen, and it's pure protein. And it's so strong that we believe that that's what enables her to last 4 years.
Yeah, because this royal jelly is how most people probably know it. But what do you think when the queen has that pure protein like that, and she's the only member of any bee tribe that gets that, right? It's only for the queens.
Yeah.
And how is that made? Where does that come from? Do they make it?
It's made within the bee. It's a cocktail.
So they have bee pollen that you talked about, the little pollen, and we know in the store people hopefully don't buy.
The bee pollen is really plant pollen that the bee has probably added an enzyme or two, and they take that plant pollen and they mix it with honey. We call that bee bread, and that's what they're feeding mostly larvae, the young. The young for the first day or two do get a little bit of the pure protein, the vitellogen, but very quickly they wean them off and give them the bee bread.
So the stuff that we know of, like the everyday products that we know from bees, is what they call bee pollen. But as you're saying, it's really more plant pollen that's been bee treated or something,
absolutely.
right? And then the royal jelly, and then honey.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is, which is really, really, really fascinating and humbling. It's good to be humbled by nature.
I like the humble bumblebee.
Yeah. In order for this factory to change its entire order of operations, within 10 minutes, which there's no factory on planet Earth, human run, that could even come close to that. They do this by communicating. We learned that the queen has overriding scents, pheromones, chemicals, that keep the hive thrumming. When the hive is attacked, the bees will release a pheromone, an attack pheromone, alerting everybody we're under attack, right? So when a bee graduates, say after 3 weeks, if they're quote unquote worthy, they have the opportunity to become a forager or a scout. As the name infers, scout bees are always on the lookout for water, because bees, just like people, need water. They're on the lookout for nectar, patches, new flowers, and they're on the lookout for pollen, because they need that protein for their young, and they're on the lookout for tree resin, like the pitchy goo on pines or on hardwoods, because and it's sometimes on leaves, the little resin, because they take that back to the hive and they create this incredible antiseptic, antiviral, antibacterial substance called propolis. And the propolis is actually a glue. So on the inside of the hive, they want to make sure that it's sealed, and they will put the propolis on the inside of the hive for any cracks. If a mouse unsuspectingly thinks that he or she has won the lottery and thinks they can get into the hive because the hive's got honey, they will be stung to death, because the honeybee, as the bumblebee, but the honeybee has a stinger. She has a barbed stinger, and it's her only way of defense. The queen has a stinger, but it is not barbed, which means that the queen could repeatedly sting. The probability of that is almost zero, but there's a tiny possibility. In a last-ditch effort, the honeybee she will sting you, and as she stings you, when she pulls away, the stinger is ripped from her abdomen and she dies. In the meantime, some people will say, "Oh, dude, I'm stung and it hurts, it hurts." It hurts because in that stinger, how ingenious is this? It pumps for up to 15 seconds. The chemicals, the adolphodin and other very strong pain medicine, which is listed now in the European Union as a drug, and it treats fibromyalgia, it treats arthritis. It's also even used to offer pain relief for people with multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, I know it as bee sting therapy.
Right. And it works for some people.
I know, for some people, they swear by it.
It's really remarkable. So when the scout bees find these new patches, they come back to the hive and they have to communicate. Ladies and gentlemen, honeybees communicate by dancing. There are many different dances. There's 4 main dances. The most interesting that some people may have heard, the waggle dance, is a stunning dance that is performed in the dark on a vertical face, and obviously the scent of these creatures is got to be strong, and how quickly they move. They do a figure 8, And it's where they stop and where they wiggle and where they have a scent patch near their very back of the posterior of their body, where they actually lift up a little flap, and that flap has collected the osmophores, the chemicals from the flowers, that she is able to share in the hive, and she dances. She does this dance that is so accurate that she can lead the forager bees as far as 8 miles exactly away. Bees have 5 eyes, 2 very large, look like compound eyes on the front, and they have 3 very small eyes on the top. The bee is able to use the angle of the sun, irrespective of whether there's cloud or not, to determine where the sun is in the sky, and doing some very highfalutin geometry, she is able to dance the precise location of where the water, where the flowers, or where the tree resin are. And depending upon how vigorously she dances, means how rich the patch of flowers, water, or tree resin is. I mean, you're talking of one relatively tiny insect amidst possibly 100,000, and yet they're able to convey this information seamlessly and quickly and switch. No muss, no fuss.
And how often does this happen? Every day?
Oh, it happens throughout the working day. Bees, it turns out, just like people, are really similar in a number of ways. Most of us, if we're fortunate, like to get a strong 8 hours of sleep. Well, bees like to sleep a good 8 hours. So during the nightfall, bees are asleep. And bees, just like people, are thrill seekers, some of them, just like some people. Bees, for heaven's sakes, and we know this genetically, have personalities, just like some people. Bees get depressed, just like some people. Bees even vote. They vote when it's time to move the old queen. So after approximately 4 years, the older queen begins to release infinitesimally less scent, less pheromone in the hive. When she does that, it signals to the nursery that they need to create another queen. And they create the queen by feeding the larvae pure vitellogen, royal jelly, pure protein for her entire metamorphosis of approximately 26, maybe 27 days. Well, maybe a day or so before the new queen is born, the old queen has to be moved. So she will take half the female workers, half the workers, so maybe 20,000, 25, 30,000. People will have seen on the news a ball. It looks like a ball, a small basketball. That's the queen is in the very center, and the workers are all around her. But where are they going? Are they just mindlessly looking for a new place? Not on your tintype. The scout bees have searched for a new home. They come back, they reconvene at the outside of the hive, and then they investigate each of the possibilities for the new location. They vote on which location is the best to move the queen. A quorum is 15. If they can get 15 scout bees to agree on where they take her, then they've got the new home. So these are their brains. To give the listeners an idea, the bee brain has a approximately 1 million neurons. That's what one human retina has. And yet in their brain, they do things that are stunning. They're teaching us all kinds of new techniques. They're helping with understanding jet lag. They're helping the computer industry make faster chips. They're helping the internet and servers understand how to displace energy so that if all of a sudden a site is hit with 1 million visitors all at once, that the server doesn't crash. Well, they give us all the clothes we wear. They give us most of the food we eat. They give us the honey. They give us powerful medicines, and they're teaching us that we need to be very mindful of the poisons that we're putting in our biosphere.
Yeah, which is what's scary. Please take a moment during your break and check out drreese.com. It's DRREESE.com. And be sure to buy one of his books because his books are amazing. They're really small, they're beautiful, and they're filled with so much wisdom and facts that we all need to know. And while you're there, you can thank him for his work by just making a small donation and get a couple extra books because I highly recommend them to stick them in your friend's gift for birthdays or whatever, special holidays. It's really nice to support the hard work of those that are doing so much to help in this lifetime. And Dr. Reese is one of those peoples. Speaking of donating, you guys, please keep using that Amazon banner. And if you haven't done that already, please go to my website because when you click on that banner and you buy from Amazon, they send me a little commission which helps support the show. I know you guys have a lot of choices from using other people's Amazon banners, but I hope you'll consider the Vidal Speaks podcast banner because we need your help to grow and keep the truth in the show coming every week. Thanks to all of you who are already doing that and using that banner. And thanks to all of you who are leaving reviews. You know I love you guys. Now, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I really do love photography, and I'm starting to be a little more active on Instagram. So check it out and follow me there because I think you'll have fun seeing some of my pictures, and it's just a good way to keep in touch with each other. All right, you guys, let's get on with the show. Here we go. Well, that part's the depressing part, really, and we're going to get to that.
Yeah, I don't want to linger on that, but they are the modern day canaries in the coal mine for sure.
Before we get there, I would like you to talk a little bit about honey and veganism, because this is a confusing subject for many, and I think there probably are some people who are vegans and say they don't believe that honey is a food that's not vegan. And then I would say probably 98% of the community believe that if you're vegan, you shouldn't eat honey. And I don't really need to tell people should or not. I see honey as very powerful medicine. I've used it in the past when I had my pneumonia. It was life-threatening.
Right.
They didn't think I was going to make it.
Right.
I was taking Manuka honey.
Yep.
And so that's a very powerful honey.
New Zealand,
Yep. I was going to ask you about Manuka honey. But while we're on this subject of just honey, I would like to know, why do some people think it's vegan and some people think it's not vegan food?
Well, on the one hand, we all can appreciate, animal lovers that we are, planet lovers that we are, that we do not take advantage of any animals. So one reality of taking honey is, of course, we're actually taking the bee food. And so 100%, I would say it's not a condiment like a jam every morning at breakfast or a treat. Honey is a very, very powerful medicine. As I said earlier, it's not like milk from a cow, for instance, where it's actually coming from a process inside the animal. The nectar is it's collected in a very separate chamber called a honey crop that only ever has the nectar, and it is just dehydrated. 20% of the water is removed from the nectar, and a couple of bee enzymes are inserted to make sure that it doesn't get contaminated. Bees are amongst the most hygienic of any creatures. I thought I would just give just a little 411, as it were, on honey. It's a very strong antiseptic, and it is renowned for its antibacterial properties.
For sure.
That's why some bandage companies line their products with diluted traces of honey. Honey is loaded with vitamins and minerals, including B1, B2, B6, pantothenic, and nicotinic acids. It's full of vitamin C as well as high amounts of fat-soluble vitamin E, K, and A. Honey also provides us, potentially, us people that are sick, with essential minerals, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, iron, copper, manganese, magnesium, and sulfur. Some of these minerals in the specific concentrations found in honey mimic human blood serum. Therefore, honey is metabolized very easily and can be a very important source of essential nutrients when somebody is sick.
That's interesting because I read that honey is the only food that includes all substances necessary to sustain life, including water.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's so profound, the impact, the medicinal impact, and the life-giving force that honey gives us. And so I totally get that part about we don't want to rob the food of the honeybee. And then that's the whole industry. They're ruining all the bees. And if you've seen any of the bee movies out there, listeners, where they're making them live in these trucks and commuting them, it's so...
it's horrendous. The commercial beekeeping in our nation is pretty much some of the harshest. The industry, we have approximately 2.7 million commercial hives, and they are trucked on 18-wheelers all over the nation. Most of them, 80+%, I believe they overwinter near Central California because it's the biggest bee orgy on planet Earth in February, and that's the almond bloom. This is an industry now that is in excess of $3 billion, and they really push the bees. They don't even feed the bees honey. They feed them corn syrup with supplements, and it's really fraught. So if you're not well, and if you do need nature's very powerful tonic, the first thing I would suggest is find a local beekeeper. Often you can do that as simply as going to your local farmer's market. Others, we're in the holiday, in the summer season, you can make it a family affair. Google a local beekeeper and make it a family trip and go and visit the beekeeper and purchase their honey. When you go and you meet these people, they're salt of the earth. They will tell you where the honey is from. If it's a big pollinating business, I would caution you not to be buying honey from, if the first question I'd ask is, so how many hives do you have? If somebody says they've got under a dozen hives, no big deal. If somebody says they've got in excess of 100 hives, it's a big deal. It's a big operation. Some operators have thousands of hives, which is fine. That's what they do. I'm just saying that's not where you want to get your honey. You want to get your honey from a local producer, somebody who says, yeah, I leave my hive up on the mountain. We get wild mountain honey, or we get in Southern California, sage honey. You want to know where your honey is coming from. And there's a very good reason, ladies and gentlemen, because the loading of our poisons in the agriculture industry, one in particular, which we may speak of later, the class called the neonicotinoids, already in Massachusetts last year, it's turning up in 70% of the honey samples. This is a poison that you don't want to be eating, especially if you're taking the honey for an illness.
Yeah, on the same note as that, if the bees are pollinating and they're near a GMO field that's spraying all this Roundup and stuff, I mean, now you're getting also poisons.
Absolutely.
So you really do need to know if you are going to use it as medicine, you really do need to find a clean source of it.
And Deborah, to be fair, it's not going to be $4 or $3. If you're looking for a deal on honey, please don't even consider honey. Honey is a medicine. So I would say, personally, I believe in the stores and otherwise. Anyhow, I think it's sold for way too little. But if you're looking for good honey, be prepared to shell forth maybe $20, $30, $40. And if you will get very good medicine for that, and it is medicine.
Yeah.
So it's worth it.
And as you said, the other great medicine in emergencies for people is the propolis when you have a sore throat or
so when you're
fever.
When you're visiting your beekeeper, you want to buy the propolis. The propolis is very sticky. It's a glue. Wow, what do? Take the blob of propolis, put it in your freezer. When you've got a sore throat, you take the I call it a blob chunk, frozen chunk, out of the freezer, whack it with something hard, get a little chunk that will break off, and pop it in your mouth. And within several minutes, your sore throat will be taken care of. It is very, very powerful medicine. In Australia, they sell it in tubes, and it takes away any oral herpes. I mentioned earlier, it's being used as a co-treatment for prostate cancer. This is very high-end stuff.
So medicine is catching on now. The medical world is catching on. And I know there's you were talking once before about the cancer, how we're using it in cancer. Are they like able to smell cancer cells or something? Do you remember we were talking about this a few months ago?
We're using bees as in another venue. The medical profession in the UK is trialing honeybees as a frontline detector from tuberculosis to lung cancer to diabetes, and even helping women sync their ovulation cycle so when they're the most fertile. The honeybee they're such an incredible creature. They can count at least to 4. They can be trained to return to feeding stations regularly during the day. They are also able to identify any number of known chemicals, 60 or more chemicals that we've given them. We put the chemical in a little dollop of honey or sweet syrup, and when the honeybee's tongue, its proboscis, tastes the sweet substance, it also gets the chemical. And so when the bees identify with the chemical, they can remember that chemical at a phenomenal accuracy rate of 98% for 72 hours. So when a patient is sick, in the UK, they have these gorgeous glass-blown bowls, and they have the bees are inside the big chamber of the glass bowl, and the patient exhales into a channel, and the breath goes into the big glass chamber. If the bees rush towards the tube opening, that obviously they can't come down the throat of the patient, and if all 3 or 4 bees in the chamber rush there, the patient is immediately diagnosed with, if they're looking for tuberculosis, lung cancer, or diabetes right away. So the bees are being used to do that. The bees are also being used in the former war-torn country of Bosnia to find landmines and TNT. There are hundreds of thousands of these landmines deployed, and children playing in the fields can be maimed, and the bees are helping to locate where the mines are and preventing children from being maimed. So these creatures are noble. They are, as my book, The Incomparable Honeybee, dubs them, they are incomparable, and they must be protected at all costs. We need to do some
things we're going to talk about here in a second.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you one more question about the vegan idea of honey. So I definitely, would tell people, because there is a whole industry that's very cruel and abusive to the honeybees. And the movies, there's some documentaries out there. If you guys are interested, you should watch them, because you'll see it for yourself. But the other issue is that many people have said that honey is just bee vomit. But from what you're saying,
that's
it's
absolute
not.
horse hockey.
Right.
That's absolute flummery.
Because I think a lot of vegans have that belief system. But can you explain, because milk is actually a product from a cow that a cow is making.
Right.
Honey
there's
is
no regret. There is no such thing as bee vomit. This is the bee. The bee collects the nectar because that's its food. It takes the water away from the nectar, which is very rich in sugars and carbohydrates that are good for us and obviously the bees. And they put a few enzymes into the substance so it doesn't begin to decompose, and it can store, right? And so there is nothing in there that has to do with a violent reaction to
or anything. It's not even something they made. No. It's just something they took from the flour and they stored it in a separate pouch, and then they dehydrate it.
Yeah.
So that's why I know Anthony Williams believes deeply in honey, and he says that he believes it is vegan. And I know there's a few other people that have said that. So that's an argument, and it's just more important that we get the word out and teach people how it's
medicine.
made. It's powerful medicine, because I don't believe that we should be taking the bees' food as an everyday food. We have so many other things.
And that's why we have a medicine chest in Fallswell. All the listeners are very cautious when they delve into their medicine chest. And they're doing it just because it is, in my opinion, an emergency. When we start to take anything daily, it becomes a real deal, because the body doesn't treat it like a medicine.
Yeah.
And particularly nature's medicine. So if you're ill, yes, by all means, use honey to get well. When you're well, nobody should be taking medicine when you're well.
Yeah, right.
It's axiomatic.
Right. So now let's transition into this idea of what's happening to the bees. So, you're a scientist, what's your opinion on what's happening? The bees.
Well,
we're
I've written a
losing
couple
so
books
many.
on it, and
yeah,
I've
please, everybody, buy Dr. Reese's book. It's very small and it's so
Easy read.
beautiful.
The
It's an
Incomparable
easy
Honeybee.
read, but it's like the size of your hand, and it's a beautiful book. So go on his website and buy it because it's fantastic.
Yeah, drreese.com. So the concern is that we have 7.5 billion procreating human beings. It's a lot of mouths to feed. And the agri-industry, which is in America, which is growing vast millions upon millions and millions of acres of soy, bean, and corn as a food for animals, which is confounding at the best of the time. And
is.
these poisons on these genetically engineered plants are insidious, and they are a new class of poison. They're very, very powerful at a couple of dozen parts per billion. The honeybees lose their minds and they shake to death. It is very eerily similar to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and it's wrong. The poisons, the neonicotinoids, are in our soils. They kill the soil organisms. That ripples in nature. Because the meadow birds that eat all the wriggly different kinds of life forms in the soil, they don't have a food source. Their populations have tumbled. The goshawks that predate on the meadow birds and the ground feeding birds, their numbers have tumbled. And this poison has not only rippled through the bird world, not only rippled into the soil world, but it's evident in a couple of years ago, we saw these poisons. They turned up in 48 streams in 23 states. Recently, we've got neonicotinoid poison samples in Iowan water. And these are chemicals that are highly, highly toxic. They alone are a huge cause of concern. There's introduced insects, there's introduced bacteria and viruses. There's the entire, what I call, animal husbandry of shipping 2.7 million hives all over the nation, not even feeding them honey. It's too much. You don't need to be a physicist. This is too much. And this is why many of the listeners, touch wood, most of them, all of them, are taking it upon themselves to grow their own food, support farmers markets that they know where it's being grown, whether it's biodynamic, whether it's organic and biodynamic. We know, ladies and gentlemen, you are what you eat and what your body absorbs. We can't continue to bombard our bodies with poisons. We know that 90% of all cities and towns globally breathe toxic air globally. We know this. And so our bodies are under constant assault. So any way you can be more gentle on your body, and vegans know this. Thankfully, we are ahead of this curve. I encourage everyone, even if you live in an apartment, to have a couple potted plants, vegetable plants, tomatoes and peppers, or whatever your joy is.
Herbs, whatever. They're so easy.
It's great because children are able, and please involve your children, because they can then see how quickly the plant grows, the food that it brings, the importance of bees to pollinate what we're eating, and also please do not use any chemicals in your yard. These neonicotinoids are still sold over the counter at most of the gardening stores, including the big chains. And the Zerk Society has alerted those of us who are watching that these poisons can be over 100 times, the neonicotinoids can be over 100 times stronger than what we're applying to the fields. So no poisons. We get around that by using companion plants. If you're growing tomatoes, put in a few marigolds.
Yeah.
And look up online companion plants.
Yeah, there's so much information on how to do that.
The other thing is that each of us can do during the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere is each morning place a bowl of water with rocks or marbles that are poking above the water level so that the bees can touch down on the rock or the marble and lap at the water. They can't drink water while hovering. They need to actually stop and land. And bees, like people, particularly the heat that we are facing and will face during the summer, they need water.
Well, and bees like people are drinking toxic water and dying.
Absolutely.
And bees like people are pollinating and taking toxins from food, and people are taking in those same toxins and dying. And that Parkinson's-like disease that you said is happening in the bees, it's happening in people too. It's just that we're bigger and we're getting poisoned slowly.
Yeah.
So people don't put the connection together, but it's all happening.
And we have to at this moment in time, we have to take things upon ourselves to do the heavy lifting.
For sure.
Now
more than ever.
The administration is not is a chemical promoting administration.
Yeah.
What else can I say?
Well, there's a lot else to say, but we won't, because as far as nature goes, it's out the window with this administration. So we all our animal nature loving people out there need to step it up and do extra work.
The other thing I want to caution our listeners too, it's a wonderful, no question, it's a powerful food, the avocado. But it's come to my attention over the last year or so, 80% of the avocados that supply planet Earth come from the Miocochin area of western Mexico. And that area, that forest, is the only, the Oyamel firs are the only overwintering, the main overwintering spot for the monarch butterflies in North America. We have a separate population here in California. Other than California, all the other populations in North America go to Mexico. The deforestation, the illegal poaching, and the illegal avocado plantations have taken off like wildfire. The poaching has tripled in the last 18 months, tree poaching. So, sometimes we're spoiled, Deborah, because we can go to a supermarket and you can get any food at any time of the year. Mm-hmm. Where I'm going with this is, in the future, we're going to need to understand we're going to have to eat locally and we're going to have to eat seasonally. Right? So in California, we're blessed because we get avocados here, but many of the listeners aren't in California. So I just want you to understand that we have to be mindful of our foods and where we're sourcing them, because we need the trees, we need the monarch butterflies. They've been beaten badly down by Roundup, glyphosate.
Well, a lot.
And they're a pollinator.
Yeah, and a lot of
milkweed.
A lot of plant-based or vegans already know, not to do palm oil because they're deforesting the trees and all our beautiful orangutans. And now we've got the
rhinos
avocado
and Sumatra
tree poaching.
Tigers.
And so you just have to look where your food's coming from. And now that we know that about the avocados, don't buy any that are from Mexico.
You have to ask where your food's coming.
From California and make sure so that you feel like you're supporting the good movement instead of something that's supporting deforesting.
The same is true for chocolate. please,
Yeah,
please
just
make
always know
sure
where it's coming
that
from.
and they're, again, it's not inexpensive, but chocolate is a treat.
Yes.
So if you have a chocolate bar a couple of times a month, and it is $5-6, those chocolate, the fair trade and the organic, they're going to families. And if you take the time and look at the back of these wonderful bars,
Yeah.
it really does give the family history. And otherwise, the other stuff is killing the planet, and it's enslaving millions of children on horrid conditions in bare feet with machetes and poisons. So these are products we got to be aware of.
That's such good advice. So on ending, let's give the listeners a few things that they can do to get bees in their life again.
Yeah, one thing I'm very
I would
bullish.
say buy Reese's book
Oh,
first.
no, well, that's kind. I think that every home should have at least one food-bearing, but preferably two food-bearing trees. So whether that's an apple, because apples can grow just about anywhere on planet Earth, or a nut tree for those that are a little further south and can grow nuts. I'm very strong on native plants, native flowering plants, and planting blocks of them, because when the bees pull into a flower patch, they only feed from one species at a time. So they do not cross their nectar or pollen when they're foraging. So we want native plants, we want food-bearing trees, we want these water bowls that need to be replenished every morning or night.
And is there any organization that people can support that helps the bees?
Well, there's a bunch of them. The Center for Biological Diversity is a good one. The Zerk Society is another excellent one. NRDC is good. The Sierra Club is good. Earth Justice is good. Many of the bigger, the
Great.
last three, they have attorneys that are fighting the administration on the horrid poisons. So they do need a hand. And you can come to my website, Dr. Reese, DRREESE.com. I podcast, and there's lots of information there. And there's a contact button. If you got a question, my assistant will get it to me, and I'm happy to answer.
Great. Awesome. Dr. Reese, as always. You know, I like that we kept it so positive, because the bees are really an amazing, I don't even like to call them an insect, because they're such a life
they're creatures.
force.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
such a life force for us, and we can't live without the bees, just like we can't live without the seas and the trees and all the animals. That's what we keep telling everybody.
Yeah, and to leave the listeners with how important the bees are, the ancient Mayans, there was a gradation of shamans that they looked upon. The Mayans kept the stingless bees in colonies. And the top shaman was responsible for many things. And one of the highest duties he was given was to escort each bee that had died, to escort their soul to heaven. So they really understood that. We know that from the codex that now the Gates family in Seattle owns, but we actually have a written history that's what they did. And it's important because we are all one.
Yes.
And the bees are very central to our health,
They are.
to our well-being, and the planet's
Well,
health
that's
and
why I
well-being.
wanted to do this show, because they bring us so much and more than people realize. And I just wanted people to be grateful for the humble bumblebee, right?
Gratitude. Yeah.
With gratitude for our humble bumblebees and all bees. So thanks for doing this. And do you want to tell the listeners your Twitter and Facebook, or should they just go on your website?
Sure.
And click from there?
I'm Reese Halter on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at Dr. Reese Halter.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And go to his website and check
Yeah.
out his podcast. They're short and sweet, and
punchy.
full of passion. What a surprise.
Yeah.
But thanks
Thank
for
you very
doing
much.
this. That was fun.
Okay.
Well, how was that science lesson? I sure loved it. The bees are truly amazing, aren't they? I hope from now on you notice every bee that flies by you and all the work they do to help us have the food on the table that we eat and the clothes that we're wearing on our body. I think it's a great project for all of us to go plant 3 bee bushes and make a bee bath in our yard or our balcony. We just did it a few days ago, and it feels good to see the bees and thank them in person, right? When I see the bees at the golf course, I always talk to them, but sadly, it's not happy talk. I always say, fly away and go somewhere that doesn't spray all these poisons. Go to my house in Hollywood where there's an organic garden and herbs for you and a bee bath with clean water in it. Once I was on the putting green with a client and there was a bee on the green buzzing around and he just smashed it with his foot as if it was nothing. I felt sick all day. I kept apologizing for humans that day. So sad people are totally not conscious about our interconnection to nature, to all nature, animals, trees, oceans, the air. If we really got that, then we'd do everything we could to keep it pristine. And look what we've done to it. It's really heartbreaking to me. At the golf course, we have little squirrels there. I got to tell you guys this story because there's lots of little squirrels. And you know how smart they are? They're so smart to get into people's bags just to get food. They get in the cart, they eat all their peanuts because they give peanuts away at the halfway house at the course where I teach. So they sneak into the carts and they steal the peanuts, or they sneak into the bag room and they eat through people's golf bags just to find their protein bars and apples and fruit. They're really smart. So over the years, they've eaten through a few of my backpacks because I always have food or snacks in my backpack. So I decided lately that I'm going to feed this one squirrel that kept coming over, chewing through my bag and going in. So one day I said, okay, he wins. Now, well, actually, I think it's a she, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So one day, when she was in my bag, I happened to have grabbed some peanuts from the halfway house, and I said, okay, here, and I put some on the ground. Well, guess what? She showed up every day. Well, she was showing up every day because she knew I had food in my bag, but now she was showing up like, are you going to feed me today? And 3 weeks ago, she brought me a baby to feed, so now I have 2. It's getting kind of ridiculous now, though, because I drive up and I'm 50 yards away from the range, and they know I'm coming. I have this kind of high bar stool that I use for my back when it gets tired. And the other day, Mama Nuts was sitting on my chair and she was waiting for me on my chair. It's crazy. One student said, you shouldn't get too close to them. You know, they have rabies. And then another one said, squirrels are just rats with tails. Really? Gosh, people have really lost connection to the amazing essence of our animal life. I'm in love with this squirrel and now its baby, and it's because of them my whole day at work is better. So thanks, Mama Nuts and Baby Nuts, for letting me hand feed you and interact with your life. Okay, I know that's a little off subject, but the point is that we all need to be aware of the beautiful nature around us and the fascinating life of every species and how we all interact to survive. Once we get that we're interconnected, then we'll do everything to save them because it saves us. I just pray we can move fast because it's becoming too late to act. And Dr. Reese Halter's new book, which is titled Save Nature Now, is titled that for a reason. It's a crisis and action is needed now. And remember, before we sign off today, if you're inspired by Dr. Reese's work, then please donate via his website, drreese.com. Buy his books. They're beautiful, small, full of wisdom, and they're amazing treasures. They're one of my favorites, and they make fantastic gifts. Well, my dear ones, I hope you enjoyed the show today. You must know what time it is by now. It's time to buzz off, as they say, and it's time to say goodbye. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace. And today, more than ever, I can say, be healthy. be free, live life.